are these people?
I'm on here with my fucking sick voice just to rant because I'm so tired of the pro-Palestine movement and people in it being labeled as divisive when we call into question someone like Lady Gaga or Ricky Martin or just anyone who's a Zionist being able to perform and still have a career and sort of just exist in public spaces and be worshipped. You're making it like, oh, you're just taking everything too seriously. It's genocide we're talking about. It's not like, oh, I didn't like their outfit one day. Or I don't like that one thing they said. Bitch, we're literally talking about, like, do they think Palestinians deserve to exist and be safe or not? We're talking about human life. This isn't just a difference of opinion. It's the same way your fucking MAGA uncle doesn't get to just have a different opinion if he thinks that we should make America white again. Like, no. Zionism is literally a form of white supremacy, and we shouldn't be allowing someone who is a Zionist to have a platform. And this is like basic shit. Do you remember when Mel Gibson went on that crazy anti-Semitic rant a million years ago, and society just canceled him because that was the right thing to do, because he was literally a psychopath, right? Like, everyone understood exactly what that was. So why is it that when it comes to Palestinian life, you can't see that for what that is? I understand that, like, a lot of these celebrities, like, they're not going on these, like, rants against Palestinian people, okay, but when you stand for a genocidal state, honestly, I don't really see what the fuck the difference is. It's not just, oh, they didn't know better. It's been 2.5 years of genocide. Everyone in 2026, if they don't see it by now, I don't know what to say. And, like, yes, if they realize, if they wake up, we will welcome them in, and we'll be mad, but we'll welcome them in. But it's like, what else do you need to see, right? If the people that you're worshiping aren't on the side of humanity at this point, I don't know what to tell you. But it's not us being divisive. It's them being fucked up. I'm honestly so...
Amen. So, this is Leila Hegazy, if you don't know. You can follow her on Instagram. She's also on Facebook. I don't know if she's anywhere else. I'm guessing probably on Threads, but I won't use that platform because I can't really stand Zuckerberg, although I've got quite a bit of Instagram to start the show. I try to move away from those, but you can't really avoid it. That's where all the content is, sadly. But I completely agree with her. And what she's talking about specifically is that there was a Super Bowl this past weekend. A guy by the name of Bad Bunny performed at the halftime show. MAGA melted down because he performed exclusively in Spanish. Most of white America was like, I don't know what the fuck this guy's saying. I guess he's good, but I don't feel like it's for me, so that's fine. But it's not for me. And then he brought Lady Gaga on stage. And like Descent in Bloom said, Lady Gaga has Zionist ties. She's literally just excused, genocide for 2.5 years. And then when Descent in Bloom Googled her, she found out that Lady Gaga's husband has ties to Peter Thiel. That's disappointing. Yeah, that's to say the least, for sure. And like Angel is saying, the handsome cynic, Angel does a show on INN on Friday afternoons at 7 Eastern, Angel in the afternoon. Most American normies are out of touch and like their favorite artist or their favorite actors, no matter who they or what they support. Absolutely true. They don't care. They just want to be entertained. All right. And also, he loved MAGA's meltdown over Bad Bunny. It was really funny when he is a citizen and there were people get this guy off the stage. Welcome, Eric Meyer, paid subscriber. Thank you so much for your support. Really, really appreciate you, brother. So, yeah, it's been a crazy week. Again, I just wanted to again, Zionism everywhere. But remember that Bad Bunny himself would never be allowed to work the Super Bowl if he wasn't part of that system. Of course, he was going to have to give something, make some kind of concession, and allow them to have some influence in some way. And remember the Robert Kraft commercial about the blue square, and that It's crazy, really, the whole thing. And to get upset about any one portion of it, I think is a little silly, but I just thought that was interesting, the fact that they would bring someone who was just, when it was supposed to be an anti-colonialism type of theme, somebody who is openly supporting the colonialism and Zionism and genocide that's going on in Israel right now, or in Gaza, in Palestine. As much as that tweaks the Israelis that we say that. Now, Miss Rachel, we all know Miss Rachel. Miss Rachel went off on a 4-video rant that, goddamn, I mean, that woman is just something. And I didn't want to download them. I just brought them up, and hopefully these will work. Here we go. I got to refresh these because I don't know where they start. Here we go. Oh no!
Members bomb their schools, bomb their hospitals.
Why can't I hear this?
And then say they're just going to live in tents now.
They're just going to live in tents now that are cold and leaking, and babies are dying of hypothermia. You can't bomb all their schools and then just say that they live in tents now and don't get to have an education. You can't say that they have this or that disease or condition and they just don't get medical care and can't evacuate. You can't just kill 20,000 plus children. You can't create the largest cohort of child amputees in modern history and just leave them without their limbs in the leaking cold tents, without prosthetics. A home is a child's human right, and education is a child's human right. That's her first rant. The time of excuses and lies and dehumanization is over. Let's see if this one's any louder. No. Everyone knows deep within that hurting a child and keeping a child from the things they need is wrong. So the kids of Gaza need warm, safe shelter, and the people, medical care, food, and to rebuild. And the time of excuses and lies and dehumanization is over. Everyone knows deep within. Right. Okay, so that's the second one. Here's the third one. I met a girl, whose brother was scared. She assured him that it was just a sound, he was going to be okay. And then he was killed in front of her. And then her other brother was killed in front of her. And then she was horrifically burned. Why would anyone kill children ever? Kill children's family members. Take away their schools, take away their homes, take away their medical care, and have them living in cold, leaking tents. The fact that children are barefoot, freezing without limbs in these tents when the supplies exist miles away. Is unbelievably cruel, and it's child abuse. And here's the last one. Mr. Rogers said, "How would I love for my son to be able to grow up in a world in which refuses to abuse its children? That's the world I want. I want a world that refuses to abuse its children, whether it's in Sudan, the Congo. It's 2026. We cannot have children be killed and be out of school and not have shelter. Those are such basic needs. Everyone is connected. Our kids will not meet their full potential until all kids have the opportunity to meet their full potential. It's just the way things work that we're all connected. And number one, it's the right thing to do for all kids to have these rights. Number two, we are all connected." She's the best of us, like the basics. But it takes somebody like Miss Rachel to actually have to come out and say this shit. Volume upper right. No, it's not the volume. It's just muted. And when I unmuted, there was like no sound. It was really low. So I just decided to read it for her. Thank goodness there's transcript along with that. But man, I'm going to link all these in the description afterwards. So by all means, please go and watch that. Subscribe to her Instagram. She often shares video conference calls that she has back and forth exchanges with Palestinian children and with children all over the world and that are impoverished and living in war zones. And she's incredible. You know, even if she makes the mistake of supporting Zoran, that's okay. Like, what are you going to do? Nobody's perfect, but man, look at how she fights for these kids right now and using her platform, being attacked on a daily basis by the Zionist lobby for it, being called pro-Hamas and a terrorist and everything else that they call her, for speaking out on behalf of these children, for saying that they should have a world where they're allowed to grow up in peace and warmth and some modicum of comfort. And I would say the same thing for all the kids right now that they're locking in these ICE detention facilities. Like Dilley, which I don't know if I have a thing, but we're going to probably talk about that later.
You can't bomb a child's home, kill their family members, bomb their schools, bomb their hospitals, and then say they're just going to live in tents now that are cold and leaking and babies are dying of hypothermia. You can't bomb all their schools and then just say they live in tents now and don't get to have an education. You can't say they have this or that disease or condition and they just don't get medical care and they can't evacuate. You can't just kill 20,000 children. You can't create the largest cohort of child amputees in modern history and just leave them without their limbs in the leaking cold tents, without prosthetics. Home is a child's human right and an education is a child's human right. Time of excuses and lies and dehumanization is over. Everyone knows deep within that hurting a child and keeping a child from the things they need is wrong. So the kids of Gaza need warm, safe shelter and the people, medical care, food, and to rebuild. I met a girl whose brother was scared and she assured him that it was just a sound and he was going to be okay, and then he was killed in front of her, and then her other brother was killed in front of her, and then she was horrifically burned. Why would anyone ever kill children, kill children's family members, take away their schools, take away their homes, take away their medical care, and have them living in cold, leaking tents? The fact that children are barefoot, freezing, without limbs in these tents when the supplies exist miles away is unbelievably cruel, and it's child abuse. Mr. Rogers said, "How I would love for my 2.5-year-old grandson to be able to grow up in a world which refuses to abuse its children." That's the world I want. I want a world that refuses to abuse its children, whether it's in Sudan, the Congo. It's 2026. We cannot have children be killed and be out of school and not have shelter. Those are such basic needs. Everyone is connected. Our kids will not meet their full potential until all kids have the opportunity to meet their full potential. It's just the way things work, that we're all connected. And number one, it's the right thing to do for all kids to have these rights. Number two, we are all connected.
So I'm sure everyone's aware here that the Olympics are going on, maybe not, but the Winter Olympics are happening right now in Italy. And at the opening ceremony, the Israelis sent a delegation out, and I don't even, why they're allowed to perform is beyond me, and nobody really realizes, but understands. But they got booed incessantly by the entire crowd. And some of the coverage tried to drown it out. NBC or somebody is copyright claiming it anytime anybody shows it, which is why I won't show it. Here, the Associated Press also reporting that an Israeli bobsled pilot reporting that their training apartment was robbed Saturday with passports and valuable items stolen. Nora Barrows-Friedman, award-winning journalist for the Indie Media Award honoree Electronic Intifada, she says everyone hates them. They've already won gold in all categories of genocide, rape, theft, and torture, not to mention the slaughter of Palestinian athletes and the bombing of all sports arenas. Hopefully by next Olympics, there won't be an apartheid colony they can represent. And I can't agree with Nora more also on that one. Nora, I wrote an article late last year in September, published about why Israel should not exist at all as a state, and especially Greater Israel should not be allowed to exist. So I brought a couple articles from Israel-Palestine News. One of them, this is written by Dr. Feroze Sidhwa. That's funny. No idea the Olympics were happening. See that? Dr. Feroze Sidhwa, we covered a couple of articles in the past on How Did We Miss That? Where he is one of the doctors that was literally let in to operate on people in Gaza. So he has a firsthand account of what was going on in there. And his reports were horrifying and frightening and just what no human should have to endure, let alone spend weeks on end, basically every waking moment, repairing people who were destroyed by bombs and bullets of all ages. And then watching a lot of them die because they could not get the medical supplies or did not have the personnel or resources available to properly treat them. The gauze, the anesthetic. Remember, they're all working without anesthetic for more than 2 years. And the amount of trucks that are allowed in with supplies, even on a daily basis, during this quote-unquote ceasefire, okay, which we know isn't a ceasefire, is a whole other story, and way, way lower than they had agreed to and that should be allowed. And that was mandated by this term in whatever the second stage that they had in after the post-ceasefire, whatever nonsense, that we knew they would never agree to in the first place. But Dr. Sidhwa wrote an article about, in multiple parts, Truth About Gaza's Death Toll. This was part 3. What do we actually know? So I'm just going to go through parts of it where he examines the robust investigations of Israel's killing, okay, and challenges Americans to decide whether Israel should be allowed to exist, let alone use U.S. weapons and money to extinguish an entire people. That's genocide by definition. All right, now he wrote this the other about a week ago. We'll continue saying the bombs are ours, not yours, as former Yemeni President Ali Abdullah Saleh to General David Petraeus. To say that the Palestinian Ministry of Health in Gaza's list of dead since October 7, 2023 is an undercount is an understatement, to say the least. As he had examined in part 2 of the series, which you could read there, the most conservative reading of the 3 scientific studies of the death toll in Gaza shows that the Ministry of Health's data is at least a 34.7 to 41.8% undercount of violent deaths in the enclave. A perfectly sensible reading of these studies is that the Ministry of Health data death toll is a more than 67% undercount, which means that more than double the amount of people that they say were killed actually were. There's also a number of non-scientific but nevertheless robust investigations of the assault that are worth examining. But unlike the scientific studies, they can't help us quantify the level of killing. However, they provide many useful comparisons to other events. These comparisons reveal that the conflicts, quote-unquote, most similar to the assault on Gaza are not wars at all, but the current slaughter in Sudan and genocides in Srebrenica and Rwanda, okay? What do we mean? Air Wars, a British non-governmental research firm, investigates how air campaigns affect civilians in wartime. Through painstaking open source investigations, combing through news, social media, etc., Air Wars has created a public archive of civilian harm incidents and reports based on that information. They've studied 12 conflicts so far, including the current assault on Gaza. Air Wars' first investigation into the Gaza death toll, released in July of 2024, and remember, it's still going on in February of 2026, examined the first 17 days of the attack. Just 17 days. In those 17 days, more allegations of civilian harm than in any month in its 10-year history of monitoring, including the U.S.-led campaign against ISIS, the NATO-led coalition in Libya, and the Russian bombardment of Syria. Yeah, even in the first 2.5 weeks of the assault, when the real-time Ministry of Health data collection was the most robust it could possibly be because they hadn't destroyed the entire infrastructure yet, they still found that only 75% of civilian deaths were being recorded. We knew that there were way more from minute one. Another investigation published in December of 24, that was, again, examined just the first 25 days of the assault. By almost every metric, the harm to civilians from the first month of the Israeli campaign in Gaza is incomparable with any 21st century air campaign. It is by far the most intense, destructive, and fatal conflict for civilians that Air Wars has ever documented. Again, in 10 years. I mean, just in those 10 days, between 5,100 and 6,600 civilians killed. The lesser of which is nearly 4 times the number of civilians killed in the most lethal month, which was March 2017 prior, where 1,470 civilians were killed by the U.S. coalition in Iraq. Oh, oops. Sorry. Yeah, we're the bad guys if you hadn't figured this out yet. The USA and Israel and the UK and all of the NATO supporting countries is who I'm talking about. Furthermore, this is a known undercount as Air Wars' work is ongoing, with additional civilian deaths from that period still under analysis. Still, 2.5 years later, they're still trying to figure out exactly how many people were killed. Because in some cases, Israel literally just vaporized an entire family with weaponry that nobody had ever seen before. So Dr. Sidhwa was saying that Air Wars generously had sent him the additional data they collected since then, totaling 696 incidents of civilian harm in the first 25 days of the assault. Again, they harmed everybody. They displaced everybody. The updated data, again, shows now between 6,311 and 8,100 people killed just in the month of October of 2023 after October 7th. 4.2 to 5.5 times as many civilians as were killed in the first 25 days of the attack on Gaza that had ever been documented. All right, and that's just one small portion of it. But remember that in these past 2 weeks that Israel has come out and admitted that, yeah, the Gaza Health Ministry, while we may not like them, yeah, it turns out their data, it's actually pretty accurate. So they're now even admitting that the Gaza Health Ministry was not overstating the number of people killed and injured. But gear up, because AIPAC is getting ready for election season. And they're already starting to make media buys. But here we've got, this is, again, just AIPAC. This is not Israel. This is not any other entity. This is one specific lobbying group. This is not J Street. This is not Zionists of America. This is not all of those other ZOA coalitions. And I talked about that, God, it was a year ago already with Gen X Girl 1994. We talked about all of the different splinter organizations that Zionists of America squirrel money into in order to be able to funnel money back into this system and control narrative. All right. So AIPAC gearing up for the midterms with $95 million war chest. All right. And this is a short article out of Haaretz. Now, this is something that I think a lot of people don't do, which is they don't look at what the Israeli papers are telling their own people. And I find it really fascinating to see what the message is that they're trying to send within Israel about how they're trying to impact America's elections. So, in this case, Haaretz is saying the pro-Israel group Super PAC has the most cash on hand since its establishment ahead of the 2026 midterms and has already spent hundreds of thousands of dollars ahead of what was last week's New Jersey Democratic primary, which the candidate they wanted to win did not. It was an anti-AIPAC candidate, Latina woman, that ended up taking that seat. Or at least that took that primary. And they'll challenge the Republican in April, which everybody's basically saying that it's a foregone conclusion she's going to win. So AIPAC's United Democracy Project Super PAC reported on January 30th having more than $95 million cash on hand ahead of the 2026 midterm primary election cycle after raising more than $62 million in the latter half of 2025. That's disheartening. Where they're getting it from is a whole other question, because a Super PAC is a political action committee that's allowed to raise and spend unlimited amounts of money to campaign independently, quote unquote, for candidates for federal office. It is the most cash on hand that the Super PAC has had heading into an election cycle since its establishment ahead of the 2022 midterms. Remember that AIPAC never directly spent money on a candidate ever prior to 2020. And then all of a sudden, they just decided that they're going to take the brakes off and just go full force and spend all the money because they can. They're doing this through American citizens, through a legal method to do this. A lot of people want them to declare themselves a foreign entity, and then they would not be able to donate to political campaigns. All right, but this is again being done by Americans, set up by Americans in America with American money, American Zionist money. So I don't know what the answer is there. So according to federal filings, AIPAC itself contributed $30 million to the Super PAC. Right, so a third of it is coming directly from AIPAC. 2 individual donors gave more than $1 million each. Republican mega donor Paul Singer. His contributions to the organization have drawn Democratic ire for several election cycles. He donated $2.5 million. He's also a guy that's involved right now in Venezuela because he was one of the few people that got access to their oil early on. Democratic mega donor Chaim Saban, he contributed $1 million. Okay, Saban recently made rare public remarks about the influence of pro-Israel mega donors on the U.S. political system while appearing alongside GOP donor Miriam Adelson at the Israel-American Council's annual conference. Quote, "Those who give more have more access. Those who give less have less access. It's simple math." And that's what this is all about for them, which is control and access and influence. And of course, Trump and his administration is all too perfectly happy to go along and allow that. But also, again, remember that this is a major Democratic Party donor, but that this is a uniparty. They don't care. It's either side. They're buying both sides of the horse race to guarantee a victory. The United Democracy Project AIPAC Super PAC has already spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on attack ads in a New Jersey Democratic primary scheduled for next Thursday, February 12th, or this coming Thursday. But I don't think it was this Thursday because it's already been conceded. Malinowski and all these people have already conceded to this Mejia, but they're targeting Tom Malinowski, who lost, and they did not get the candidate they wanted. Although AIPAC has said that the campaign is driven by Malinowski's critical stance on Israel, the ads make no mention of Israel, which is interesting. Instead, they portray him negatively to Democratic donors by accusing him of supporting Trump's anti-immigration efforts and that he cannot be trusted. Those are actually running in my area because I live in that district or near that district. Democrats have become increasingly irate over AIPAC's Republican-funded attack ads, influencing Democratic parties, while with internal critics of the party's status quo approach often citing AIPAC's support as potentially disqualifying for candidates. You don't say! You mean supporting genocide is a deal breaker for some of the supporters of the Democratic Party? Could have fooled me. I mean, it guarantees that they're going to lose because they're always going to split their base. Liberal pro-Israel group J Street, President Jeremy Ben-Ami, recently decried AIPAC's 5-year pattern of deploying vast financial resources, primarily raised from Republican donors, to intimidate, punish, or defeat Democrats AIPAC deems insufficiently pro-Israel. That's basically everyone. They want everybody to be Richie Torres, which is gross. With tens of millions of dollars in the bank, the implicit threat to sitting members of Congress and candidates alike is hard to ignore. And again, this is coming from Haaretz. This is an Israeli paper that's reporting on this. All right, so that's the perspective that you're getting from Israel about how they see the 2026 election. Which doesn't really matter which side, because they're going to win no matter what, because they're buying both sides off. But just remember, again, that this was never and has never been a ceasefire. This is Dr. Intishar al-Rabai. She was one of 24 victims killed in Gaza 2 days ago, February 8th, 2026. 24 people, mostly civilians, including 7 children and a doctor. And that's the doctor. Why? Because Hamas. When was the last time there was anything that was fired back at Israel from within Gaza? Like outside of those walls? It's been a long time since I've heard of any of that happening. I'm going to keep going. We have, and this is a mess, Indie Media Award honoree Mondoweiss reporting on the reopening of the Rafah crossing. So, handcuffs, interrogation, and humiliation. Palestinians describe the Israeli treatment at the Rafah crossing. So, we know that Israel is not really happy with having to move to the next stage of their ceasefire because they never intended to honor it in the first place because they never ceased fire. The only thing they did was they made everybody else cease while they continued to fire. That's a Rafat al-Arir quote. May he rest in power. The first Palestinians returned to Gaza from Egypt through the Rafah crossing this week after being stuck outside Gaza for 2 years or more. They described grueling interrogations, intimidation, and of course, threats by Israeli soldiers at the crossing. From Tareq Hajjaj, who's one of the best over at Mondoweiss. All right, here's a picture of some of the Palestinians coming from the Rafah crossing in a vehicle with a UN label at Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis in the southern Gaza Strip. Okay, this was 10 days ago, or 8 days ago, February 2nd. Shackled, interrogated, and humiliated. That is how Intisar el-Akir, a Palestinian woman from Gaza, described her experience as one of a dozen people who returned back to Gaza from Egypt through the Rafah border crossing this week. And she might feel like she won the lottery because she got to go back, because she is one of those dozen, to go back into the most disgraced, horrible conditions. But it's her home, and that's where she wants to be. In a widely circulated video on social media, Al-Akir steps off a bus arriving from the Rafah crossing into Gaza, her outstretched hands showing signs of being handcuffed. She describes how she was harshly interrogated for 3 hours, how she was forced to identify her son among a group of people, and how Israeli investigators kept aggressively asking her about his whereabouts. I do not know where any of them are, she says, recounting that the interrogators kept yelling at her and telling her that she was a liar. As an elderly woman, she kept begging them to let her rest. They killed me while they were hitting me and tying the handcuffs tighter on my hands. They put fire inside me. They burned my heart. For close to 2 years, tens of thousands of Palestinians like Al-Akir have been trapped outside Gaza, waiting to return home after leaving the Strip during the genocide. That long-awaited opportunity finally came on February 2nd when the Rafah crossing with Egypt was opened. Israel had unilaterally shut down the border after attacking and taking control of it in May 2024, which, remember, Joe Biden had said was a red line, and then did nothing because he pooped his pants. Initial reports estimated, based on Israeli claims, that each day 50 people would be allowed by Israeli authorities to return to Gaza, while 150 people would be allowed to leave the Strip. That's not a big number for either. However, local Palestinian reports confirmed that during the past 4 days since the crossing opened, a total of 138 Palestinians and their companions left Gaza, while only 77 people were allowed back in. So they treated it as a maximum of 50 people, or they couldn't process them and interrogate them enough, and then decided that some of them would not be allowed, likely, so they turned them away, would be my guess as to why Israel would make an excuse that they did not allow a full 50 each day and 150 to leave. Rutana Rakib, who accompanied her sick mother to Egypt for medical treatment in March of 2024, was also part of that first group of Palestinians to return back to Gaza this week. She recounted her return to Mondoweiss, describing degrading treatment by Israeli soldiers at the Rafah crossing. Just because they can, just because they're monsters. According to Rutana, the process of returning to Gaza by registering with the Palestinian embassy in Egypt, where stranded Palestinians must submit their names for pre-approval. Those approved are then informed of their return date to Gaza. Rutana tells Mondoweiss that on the first day that the crossing reopened, 4 buses departed from the Egyptian city of Al-Arish toward Gaza, but when they got to the border, the Israelis only allowed 1 bus carrying 13 people through, ordering the other 3 buses to return to Al-Arish. According to Rutana, 4 of the 13 people were almost not let through, allegedly due to the fact that they were carrying more than the permitted single bag per person to have their entire life belongings. Fuck Israel. After completing procedures on the Egyptian side, which Rutana described as extremely humane, the travelers dealt with Palestinian staff at the crossing who also treated them well. They were then informed that after passing the Palestinian checkpoint, the Israeli army would take control until they entered Gaza. From that point on, she said, her suffering began, because that's what Israel does. We reached the Israeli point without the Red Crescent, no humanitarian organizations, no escorts, only the bus driver and the passengers. An Israeli military jeep drove in front of the bus, and another followed behind. Upon arrival, Israeli soldiers did not directly take them into custody. Instead, Palestinian personnel wearing uniforms, labeled Counter-Terrorism Unit, the same name used by the Israeli-backed gangs in Rafah, by the way, received them, searched them physically one by one, then handed them over to the Israeli army. So effectively, they used cutouts to first do the initial inspection of the Palestinian people that were returning to make sure that they weren't armed in any way, shape, or form and weren't going to attack anyone. So they sent Palestinians human shields in there. Huh. I thought Israelis were against human shields. Oh, right. No, they're not at all. At the Israeli security check, soldiers handcuffed the passengers, blindfolded them, and led them to interrogation rooms. Yeah, that's standard practice in a democracy, in a democratic country. Sure. What are you doing in Gaza? Why did you return? The soldiers repeatedly asked the passengers. She said the questions were focused on the reasons for leaving and coming back, along with politically charged questions, which interrogators insisted on asking over and over again. Passengers were allegedly given limited time to answer, and if their answers didn't satisfy the soldiers, they were threatened with detention, prolonged handcuffing, imprisonment, and transfer to Israeli death camps that they call prisons. If you don't answer within the given time, we will arrest you and you will never see your children again. You will never enter Gaza. Gaza belongs to us now, they told her. One interrogator told her, what if we bring your children from Gaza right now? You take them and leave Gaza forever and never return. She says she understood this as an attempt to force Palestinians off their land. They will never leave. They don't care who comes back or who leaves. They want all of Gaza. They want the land without its people, as I had been reporting for 2 years plus now. One interrogator repeatedly told her, even if it takes 30 years, we will take all of Gaza. I mean, they haven't suffered enough, apparently, according to Israelis, which is disgraceful. 2 years of destroying these people's lives. And you're just going to take everything and then expel them. The Somaliland, that's the plan, by the way. She describes being taken from one place to another, hands painfully bound, eyes repeatedly covered and uncovered, guns pointed at their heads as they were asked questions to which they had no answers. That sounds like the people off the Freedom Flotilla, doesn't it? Quote, they used the worst methods of interrogation and humiliation. Their main goal was to push us to leave Gaza again, but they failed. Speaking about the crossing itself, Rutana says Rafah no longer looks like the border terminal it once was. It's just a fenced corridor with high barriers on both sides. The rest of the crossing is completely burned out. We see that. We saw that they bombed the Rafah crossing in 2024. She adds that returnees pass through 3 different Israeli gates where facial scans are conducted before being taken for interrogation. I mean, this is the Gestapo state right here. This is what ICE is actually trying to start implementing here. You're seeing an advanced preview of what is coming here over there. So don't act like this is just happening over there. In another testimony, Huda Abu Abed, an elderly woman, describes a similar experience. What a surprise. She says all returnees went through nearly identical conditions. While on the bus, she saw Israeli military jeeps driving behind them and ahead of them. When she asked the bus driver where they were going, he replied saying, to the unknown. Huda says she believed that the journey was over after being searched on both Egyptian and Palestinian sides. Ha ha ha. Little did she know, she expected them to return directly to her family in Gaza. Instead, passengers were taken off the bus, divided into small groups. Her name was called. Soldiers pointed at her saying, bring that old woman. Okay, Palestinian man from the counterterrorism unit took her by the hand and handed her over to the soldiers. She said, I'm an elderly sick woman. Is there no humanity, no dignity in taking me by the hand and delivering me to armed soldiers? She said she has severe vision loss and should have been treated with care, not dragged into the interrogation rooms, handcuffed and blindfolded. And again, same questions. Why are you returning to Gaza? What do you have there? Who told you to return? The questions were all familiar. She explained that she was returning with her daughter. who had left her children behind in Gaza in order to accompany her mother for treatment in Egypt and wanted to reunite with her children, assuming that her children were still alive to look for them. After more than 2 hours of interrogation, soldiers told her to deliver a message that the people of Gaza should pack up their belongings and leave at the first opportunity. Again, they're telling the people of Gaza that they want to steal their land, that they want to steal the resources underneath it, that they want them to leave. Huda says that under that pressure, she began to panic and started screaming for her daughter, who helped her walk due to her poor eyesight. Soldiers told her that her daughter was on the bus, but later she realized they were lying. Her daughter was also being interrogated. After some time, they were finally released and taken back to the bus before finally being let through to Gaza, traumatized and frightened for their lives, which is the whole point of this interrogation. We will not leave. This became the defining message that Palestinians returning to Gaza insisted on repeating, no matter how destroyed or scarred by war it is. Huda told Mondoweiss that all Palestinians must stay on their land, urging those who left Gaza to return as soon as possible. We will not leave our country. Rutana explains that many left Gaza alone, not with their families, because only limited people were allowed to leave to accompany sick relatives. She herself left with her mother, but left behind her husband and children living in displacement camps in Gaza. She said, the main reason I returned is my family. This is my country. I missed my family deeply, and I wanted to reunite with my children, whom I hadn't seen for more than a year, almost 2. Most of the testimonies collected from Palestinians returning from Egypt say the same. The overwhelming reason was family. Despite knowing that their homes had been destroyed, that their relatives were displaced, that many were now living in worn tents, they returned without hesitation. Quote, when I left Gaza, my family was still living in our home in Khan Yunis. When I returned, I found that the house had been bombed while my family was inside. My husband was seriously injured and is now unable to move. They're living in a tent instead of a home. I didn't even know what life in a tent meant until I lived it myself. Despite everything, she insists on her decision. Even if I were given the choice again, I would return to Gaza. Life in Egypt, despite the warmth and care shown to Palestinians, is exile. Gaza is our homeland. Our family is there. We do not want to be separated from them. I didn't see my children for an entire year. That would break me. Every day I was torn apart as I followed the news, watching the bombing and destruction, asking myself, who's holding my children? Who's comforting them when they're afraid? Now I've returned to them. I'll stay with them. I will not leave with them, and I will not leave Gaza. She echoed the sentiment. Huda, the elderly blind woman, echoed the sentiment, recalling suffering a severe health crisis in Egypt that put her in intensive care. She says she felt close to death, and at that moment, she had only one wish: to return to Gaza and die there. There is nothing that compares to being in your homeland, she says. Nothing, no matter how comfortable, stable, or safe exile may be. Home is more beautiful than anything else. We were born there. Everything here is blessed. We will not leave our country. We will do everything we can to return to it, to live in it, to die in it, and to be buried in its earth. Man, I told you it was going to be dark, but at the same time, it's also inspirational how hard they are fighting to still go back to what has been completely leveled and destroyed, because fuck Israel. So again, that is Mondoweiss. Heartbreaking, but I think important. But remember that Israel is not just invading and destroying Gaza. They are also stealing Lebanon, bombing Lebanon. So this is, I believe, Jason Ditz from antiwar.com, another Indie Media Award honoree. Rate of Israeli strikes on Lebanon at the highest level since the ceasefire. Multiple attacks reported today against eastern Lebanon. All right, that was 5 days ago. Israel's invaded Lebanon, in late 2024, culminating in a ceasefire that was reached in November of that year. It was never much of a ceasefire, again, with Israel consistently launching attacks on Lebanese territory ever since. Have the Lebanese fired on Israel? Anybody in the chat? Can anybody tell me? Has there been any Lebanese people firing on Israel, to your knowledge? Last I heard, the answer is no. With the escalations, though, it's, again, even less of a ceasefire than ever, whatever that means. Strikes are happening on a virtually daily basis, and in January, at least 50 distinct air raids were reported. Ceasefire, right, Israel? Making that month the highest since the ceasefire went into effect. Hey, guys, a ceasefire does not include distinct air raids. This escalation does not seem to be over, because the Greater Israel Project has not been achieved by Israel. Today, multiple Israeli attacks were reported against various sites in southern and eastern Lebanon. The mountains around Hermel are in particular, being hit heavily, though exactly what's being targeted is unclear, beyond Israel generally saying it's attacking Hezbollah infrastructure, quote unquote, which means that they just want to destroy an area, mostly civilian. While it's still early in February, the pace of strikes certainly shows no signs of slowing down. And if anything, the escalation is continuing apace. It is only that the month has fewer days that it's liable to stop February from setting a new high mark for strikes. Today's strikes, this was again 5 days ago, so this was Friday or Thursday, included 2 air raids against Mahmoudiyah, one against the Hasbaya district, and also the strikes in the mountains near Hermel. Given the 50 raids per month high, today is well above the usual pace, in keeping with Israel's constant threats for further escalation. Because who's stopping them? The IDF statements, I don't even know why you publish them because they're absolute bunk, claimed that the various strikes hit underground Hezbollah weapons storage, trust me, bro, and claimed to have seen secondary explosives which proved that weapons were there. They offered, as usual, no evidence that any of the sites contained weapons. Thank you for at least including that. I wouldn't even include the statement. I would just say that the IDF offered no evidence that any sites contained weapons that they claimed were there. Finally, in our Fuck Israel segment, a little bit of good news. All right, we talked about the Elbit protesters in London that had tried to stop the defense contractor from continuing providing the UK and Israel with weaponry to assault Gaza. So they were brought up on trial. Their members had actually gone through a hunger strike. But the Palestine Action protesters were found not guilty of burglarizing Elbit systems, where the campaigners claim a huge blow to government after a landmark prosecution of Direct Action Group fails. Now, this does not mean that they're no longer proscribed as a terrorist group. Remember, Palestine Action disbanded as an organization because they were proscribed as a terrorist group by the UK government. And to say that you support Palestine Action was then deemed to be supporting terrorism, even though the group no longer exists, which is insane. So, 5 out of the 6 defendants were granted bail late Wednesday. A 6th defendant, Sam Corner, was not granted bail. The defendants had to apply for bail because the prosecution will seek a retrial on charges where the jury were unable to reach a verdict, which is cruel. So here's what the article says. 6 Palestine Action protests. Let's listen to this. Can we play it? No, maybe not. 6 Palestine Action protesters have been found not guilty of aggravated burglary at an Elbit weapons site near Bristol, UK. Zoe Rogers, Fatima Zainab Rajwani, Charlotte Hand, Samuel Corner, Leona Cameo, and Jordan Devlin were also not convicted of any other charges by a jury at Woolwich Crown Court on Wednesday. The group were on trial for a break-in at an Israeli-owned arms factory on August 6th of 2024 at the height of the genocide in Gaza. I don't know what that means because the genocide is continuing to happen. I guess the killings were at their height. Keir Starmer's Labour government only placed partial restrictions on arms exports to Israel the following month. The activists spent 18 months on remand before their trial began in November of 2025. Jurors did not convict them of any charges, despite the judge trying to limit the defenses available to the activists. The jury could not reach verdicts on some charges, opening the door for the prosecution to seek a possible retrial and forcing the defense to apply for bail, which is exactly what ended up happening. A spokesman for Defend Our Juries said that the not guilty verdicts for the aggravated burglary charges were a, quote, huge blow to government ministers who've tried to portray Palestine Action as a violent group to justify banning it under badly drafted terrorism legislation. Despite government efforts to prejudice this trial, citing the allegations of violence to justify treating Palestine Action as terrorists, which they never were, as if they were already proven, the jury, which heard the evidence, has refused to find the defendants guilty of anything, not even criminal damage. It shows how out of step this government is with public opinion, which is revulsed by the government and Elbit's complicity in genocide. Around 40 friends and family of the defendants were gathered outside the Woolwich Crown Court, hugging and crying. Inside, bail hearings were ongoing for the 6, with rulings expected before 3 p.m. Again, 5 of the 6 were granted bail. Friends said that they hoped they would be coming out today. Moved to a patch of grass outside the court, several in the crowd shared a meal on paper plates and greeted an increasing number of supporters who arrived by public transport. A truck carrying prisoners passed by with an audible banging sound from inside. The crowd started to cheer. One drummed. They're just excited. Okay, so a little bit of good news, a tiny little bit of good news. One of them still didn't even get bail. So remember, they can never actually give us anything. They never can. You know, Jesse Jett wrote a piece that he's only played so far, recorded on American Tradition so far. It's going to be on his next album. It's called The Win. And is that all we get before we go? And that, is this all we ever get? You know, of course they're going to always add strings to it. Of course you're never going to get it exactly the way you expected it, the way you wanted it. Of course there's going to be somebody on the other side pushing back. And again, this is another Indie Media Award honoree. We should support independent media from Declassified UK. Outstanding outlet. IndieMediaAwards.substack.com. You can find links to all these different incredible places like Antiwar.com and Mondoweiss.com. Okay. That's why I built that. All right. That's our Fuck Israel portion. We got through it and it was an hour. Oh my goodness. All right. Fuck Israel. And welcome to Indie News Now Live. Go start spraying the agricultural land with glyphosate in Lebanon. That's absolutely another thing that they're doing for sure. I don't know if anybody answered me about, is Lebanon fighting back at all? Are they attacking Israel or Israel's just claiming, trust me, bro, Hamas Hezbollah dropping bombs, and just like they don't provide receipts anywhere. Okay. Denver Attaway, welcome, brother. Israel is expanding infrastructure internally as well. Massive port construction, rail, tunnels, public transit, electrical infrastructure in lockstep with Belt and Road. And you had suggested this in November of 2025 over on Rumble. Yep, that's right. That is still happening for sure. And that was CDR News that you sent me a link to over there. So check that out. Elbit is IDF. Absolutely. By the way, I have some special news. If you're watching on YouTube, you can actually, but please don't, leave a super chat for the first time in more than 2 years. We got remonetized this week. Holy crap. YouTube finally decided that we were let out of the penalty box and we can get super chats and super stickers. And we're going to set up, I don't know if we're going to set up channel memberships, but remember, 30% any money you give there goes to them. And we have to collect $50 before we get it. So if you're going to support independent media, and please do, these are the ways that we prefer that you do it. Cash App, $, Indie News Network. Ko-fi.com/Indie News Network. Takes a very small fee. If you go over to paypal.me/Indie News Network, there's no fee if you do it as friends and family. If you go to patreon.com/Indie News Network, you can subscribe monthly or annually. I think you could start as low as $3 a month. Then we've got IndieNewsNow.com. That's a website I built that aggregates news from across independent media, including all the INN content, but from a lot of other different places. And then you can get merch there. You can stream live. You can watch the live streams there. You can also now look at posts by day. I added a content calendar there. So that's really cool. And then over at Substack, if you're over on Substack, INNnewsletter.com and IndieMediaToday.com, you can again subscribe annually or monthly over there. Thank you so much for everyone that does. Really appreciate everybody who does that. Support independent media because we need it more than ever. I love you all, and we will see you next week. I promise. I'll be back. No! We just fucking lost the stream!
I guess this isn't such an awful place. Is that what you want me to say?